You are listening to an extended audio preview of Servitor Creation and Thoughtforms, written by Adam Lusum and published by LLH Media. The complete book is available from LLH Media and selected online retailers. Chapter 1: Introduction to Servitors and Thoughtforms. Throughout the course of human history, there has been a persistent fascination with the invisible powers that shape our lives. From the earliest days, people have wondered about the unseen forces that seem to guide fate, inspire creativity, or bring about sudden changes in fortune. In every culture, stories abound of spirits, gods, and supernatural beings that exist alongside humans, influencing the world in mysterious ways. Yet hidden beneath these myths and legends, there exists a subtler, more psychological phenomenon, the creation of entities by the human mind itself. These entities, known in modern esoteric practice as servitors and thoughtforms, are not the product of external supernatural agencies, but rather the result of deliberate or unconscious mental activity. To understand servitors and thoughtforms, one must first appreciate the power of the mind to shape reality, not only through action and intention, but also through the creation of internal constructs that take on a life of their own. The idea that thoughts can manifest as seemingly autonomous entities is both ancient and surprisingly modern. It bridges the gap between spirituality and psychology, offering a unique perspective on the intersection of belief, imagination, and will. The term thought form refers to a construct created by mental focus, emotional energy, and intention. Thought forms can be as simple as the fleeting images conjured during daydreams, or as complex as elaborate personalities imbued with purpose and agency. A servitor, on the other hand, is a specific type of thought form, consciously created and programmed by a practitioner for a particular function. Servitors are distinct from more general thought forms in that they are intentionally crafted tools, designed to perform tasks, protect their creator, or influence circumstances according to their programming. The roots of these concepts reach deep into the history of magical and esoteric traditions. In ancient Egypt, priests animated statues of the gods through ritual and invocation, imbuing them with spiritual presence. In Tibet, Buddhist practitioners speak of tulpas, mental constructs that through intense meditation and will become independent entities. In Western occultism, the idea of the egregore describes a collective thought form created by the shared beliefs and energies of a group. While the terminology may differ, the underlying principle remains the same. The focused mind can give rise to entities that act within, and sometimes beyond, the realm of imagination. The development of the concept of thought forms can be traced through several key historical currents. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the Theosophical Society, led by figures such as Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and Annie Besant, popularized the notion of thought forms in the West. In their writings, particularly in the book Thought Forms by Annie Besant and C.W. Leadbeater, they described how emotions and intentions could create visible shapes in the astral plane, perceivable by those with psychic sensitivity. These thought forms were said to be colored and shaped according to the nature of the emotion or idea that created them. Anger might produce jagged red forms, while loving thoughts would manifest as gentle, rose-hued clouds. The Theosophists' ideas found fertile ground in the burgeoning fields of psychology and psychoanalysis. Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, though not directly concerned with the occult, explored the ways in which unconscious ideas and archetypes could influence behavior, sometimes with a force that seemed almost independent of the conscious mind. Jung's concept of the autonomous complex bears a striking resemblance to the idea of a thought form, an aspect of the psyche that operates with its own goals and motivations, often outside the awareness or control of the individual. Jung also introduced the concept of the collective unconscious, a reservoir of shared symbols and myths that shape human experience, paralleling the occult notion of group-created egregores. As the 20th century progressed, the Western magical revival brought renewed interest in the practical creation and use of thought forms. Influential figures such as Austin Osman Spare developed techniques for deliberately crafting servitors, personal entities designed to carry out specific magical tasks. Spare's system, sometimes called sigil magic, involves the distillation of desire into a symbolic form, which is then empowered through ritual and released into the subconscious. The servitor, created in this way, acts as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind, working to fulfill its creator's intent. Modern practitioners of Chaos Magick, a movement that emerged in the late 20th century, have further developed these ideas. Chaos magicians emphasize the pragmatic use of belief and the adaptability of magical techniques. For them, servitors are not only useful magical tools, but also exemplars of the fluidity of reality itself. By creating and interacting with servitors, practitioners learn to harness their own psychological resources, bypass internal resistance, and effect change both within themselves and in the external world. Despite their esoteric origins, the concepts of servitors and thought forms have relevance far beyond the boundaries of occult practice. In the realm of psychology, the creation of internal parts or subpersonalities is a well-recognized phenomenon. Therapies such as internal family systems and voice dialogue work with these internal entities, helping individuals negotiate with aspects of themselves that have taken on distinct roles or identities. The boundaries between psychological constructs and magical thought forms are, in many ways, matters of perspective and intention. The significance of servitors and thought forms in modern esoteric practice lies in their accessibility and adaptability. Unlike traditional spirits or deities, which are often bound by mythological or religious frameworks, servitors can be created by anyone, tailored to individual needs and preferences. They offer a means of engaging directly with the hidden powers of the mind, fostering creativity, self-mastery, and a sense of agency. For many practitioners, working with servitors is not merely an exercise in magical technique, but a journey of self-discovery and transformation. To appreciate the practical value of servitors and thought forms, consider the ways in which they can be integrated into daily life. A student might create a servitor to aid in concentration and memory, programming it to prompt timely study sessions and enhance recall during exams. An artist could craft a muse-like thought form designed to inspire new ideas and ward off creative blocks. A person struggling with anxiety might develop a protective servitor tasked with providing reassurance and emotional support. In each case, the servitor acts as a focus for intention, a repository for will, and a catalyst for change. The flexibility of servitor creation allows for experimentation and personalization. Some practitioners prefer simple, abstract forms, geometric shapes, glowing orbs, or swirling clouds of color. Others invest their servitors with detailed personalities, appearances, and backstories, treating them almost as imaginary friends or spirit guides. The process of creation can be as formal or as spontaneous as desired, involving elaborate rituals or simple acts of visualization and affirmation. At the heart of servitor work lies the principle of intentionality. The power of a servitor derives from the energy and focus invested by its creator. The more clearly defined its purpose, the more effective it is likely to be. Ambiguity and lack of direction can lead to unpredictable results, as the servitor may act according to unconscious motivations rather than conscious will. For this reason, practitioners are encouraged to spend time clarifying their goals, crafting clear instructions, and establishing boundaries for their servitor's actions. The ethical dimension of servitor creation is another important consideration. Because servitors are extensions of the creator's mind, their actions ultimately reflect the intentions and values of the practitioner. Using servitors to harm others, manipulate free will, or pursue selfish ends carries potential consequences, not only in the realm of magical cause and effect, but also in terms of psychological integrity. Many traditions emphasize the importance of self-awareness, responsibility, and respect for the autonomy of others when working with thought forms. The question of whether servitors and thought forms possess independent existence is a subject of ongoing debate among practitioners. Some view them as purely psychological constructs, tools for focusing the mind and harnessing inner resources. Others believe that under certain conditions, thought forms can become semi-autonomous, interacting with the environment and even being perceived by others. Anecdotal reports abound of servitors acting in unexpected ways, fulfilling their purposes with uncanny precision, or persisting beyond the conscious attention of their creators. From a skeptical perspective, these phenomena can be explained as manifestations of the subconscious mind, confirmation bias, or the power of suggestion. The human brain is adept at finding patterns and attributing agency to inanimate objects or abstract concepts. Yet from the point of view of magical practice, the distinction between real and imagined is less important than the results achieved. If working with servitors brings about desired changes in behavior, perception, or circumstance, their ontological status becomes a secondary concern. The language used to describe servitors and thought forms often blurs the line between metaphor and literalism. Terms like programming, feeding, and banishing evoke the imagery of computers, pets, or spirits, respectively. These metaphors serve as useful frameworks for understanding and interacting with thought forms, but they should not be mistaken for objective descriptions of reality. Instead, they function as tools for organizing experience, shaping expectation, and guiding practice. It is important to recognize that servitor creation is not without risks. Poorly defined or neglected servitors can become sources of distraction, anxiety, or compulsive behavior. In rare cases, practitioners report feeling haunted by thought forms that have outlived their usefulness or developed unwanted traits. For this reason, responsible servitor work includes provisions for dissolving or reabsorbing thought forms when their purpose has been fulfilled. Rituals of banishing, grounding, and integration help ensure that the energies invested in servitors are safely reclaimed. The study of servitors and thought forms opens a window into the creative power of the human mind. It invites us to explore the boundaries between imagination and reality, intention and action, self and other. Whether approached as a psychological tool, a magical practice, or a form of personal mythology, the creation of thought forms offers a pathway to greater self-understanding, empowerment, and transformation. In contemporary esoteric circles, the practice of servitor creation is often seen as a democratization of magic. Unlike traditional systems that require initiation, adherence to dogma, or reliance on external authorities, servitor work places the power directly in the hands of the individual. It encourages experimentation, critical thinking, and personal responsibility. Practitioners are invited to become the authors of their own magical narratives, shaping their inner and outer worlds through conscious intention. This accessibility has contributed to the widespread adoption of servitor techniques in a variety of contexts. Online communities, books, and workshops offer guidance on the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of thought forms. The language of servitor magic has even permeated popular culture, appearing in fiction, gaming, and self-help literature. As interest in mindfulness, manifestation, and personal development continues to grow, the principles underlying servitor creation find new applications and interpretations. One of the most intriguing aspects of thought form work is its capacity to bridge gaps between different systems of belief and practice. A devout Christian might frame servitors as guardian angels, while a secular psychologist might view them as coping mechanisms or subpersonalities. A chaos magician may see them as experiments in belief, while a Buddhist practitioner might relate them to the concept of tulpas. This adaptability reflects the underlying universality of the human impulse to externalize intention, to create agents that serve our needs, and to interact with the world through symbols and stories. The process of creating a servitor is, at its core, an act of imagination guided by will. It begins with the identification of a need or desire, a problem to be solved, a goal to be achieved, a quality to be cultivated. The practitioner then conceptualizes an entity suited to this purpose, defining its attributes, abilities, and limitations. Through visualization, ritual, and emotional investment, the servitor is brought to life, imbued with energy and direction. Ongoing interaction, reinforcement, and feedback enable the servitor to grow in efficacy, adapting to the evolving needs of its creator. Servitors can take many forms, limited only by the imagination of their creators. Some are simple and utilitarian, symbolic shapes, sigils, or abstract presences, appearances, personalities, and even voices. The choice of form depends on the intended function, the preferences of the practitioner, and the degree of engagement desired. For some, a servitor is a silent, invisible helper. For others, it is a companion, mentor, or protector with whom they interact on a daily basis. The programming of a servitor involves the articulation of clear instructions, parameters, and boundaries. This may include the definition of its purpose, the scope of its activities, the means by which it receives energy or sustenance, and the conditions under which it is to be dissolved. Some practitioners establish lifespans for their servitors, ensuring that they are automatically reabsorbed after a certain period or upon completion of their task. Others maintain ongoing relationships with long-term servitors, integrating them into their personal magical or psychological systems. The maintenance of a servitor requires periodic attention, reinforcement, and evaluation. Like any tool or relationship, a servitor functions best when it is regularly engaged, updated, and appreciated. Neglect can lead to a decline in effectiveness, while excessive attachment may foster dependency or distraction. Striking a balance between autonomy and oversight is essential for productive servitor work. Dissolving a servitor is as important as creating one. When a servitor has fulfilled its purpose or is no longer needed, it should be respectfully thanked, its energy reclaimed, and its form allowed to dissipate. This process may involve rituals of visualization, affirmation, or symbolic action. The dissolution of a servitor reinforces the practitioner's control over their inner landscape, preventing the accumulation of obsolete or uncontrolled thought forms. The practice of servitor creation is not limited to solitary work. Groups and organizations can create collective thought forms, egregores, that embody shared values, goals, and energies. These group entities can serve as focal points for collaboration, cohesion, and collective action. The dynamics of group-created thought forms are complex, reflecting the interactions, beliefs, and intentions of their creators. Maintaining the health and effectiveness of an egregore requires ongoing care, communication, and alignment of purpose. The study and practice of servitor creation invite ongoing inquiry and exploration. Each practitioner brings their own perspective, experiences, and creativity to the process, enriching the collective understanding of thought forms. As with any esoteric art, mastery comes through practice, reflection, and adaptation. The principles outlined in this book are intended as guidelines, not dogma. Each reader is encouraged to experiment, question, and develop their own approach. In conclusion, servitors and thought forms represent a convergence of ancient wisdom and modern insight. They embody the creative potential of the human mind, the power of intention, and the capacity to shape reality through imagination and will. Whether approached as tools of magic, instruments of self-development, or expressions of personal mythology, thought forms offer a versatile and empowering path for those who seek to understand and harness the hidden forces within and around them. As we move forward in this book, we will explore the detailed processes of servitor creation, programming, maintenance, and dissolution. We will examine case studies, practical techniques, and ethical considerations, drawing on the experiences of practitioners from diverse backgrounds. By the end of this journey, you will have the knowledge and skills to create your own servitors and thought forms, unlocking new dimensions of self-mastery and creative power. The world of servitors awaits, an invitation to become the architect of your own inner universe and to discover what lies beyond the boundaries of ordinary thought. Chapter 2: Historical Roots, From Tulpas to Modern Constructs. The concept of thought forms, the idea that the human mind can generate independent, self-sustaining entities through focused intention and imagination, is both ancient and surprisingly modern. While contemporary occultists and magicians often discuss servitors and constructs as tools for personal transformation or magical practice, these ideas are rooted in a deep and varied history. To understand the development of thought forms and servitor creation, it is necessary to trace their origins through different cultures and traditions, from the mysticism of Tibetan Buddhism to the ceremonial magic of the Western esoteric schools. This historical journey reveals not only the universality of the idea, but also how it has evolved and been adapted to fit the needs and worldviews of different societies. The concept of creating a being or force through mental focus is perhaps most famously associated with the Tibetan idea of the tulpa. In Tibetan Buddhism, particularly within the Vajrayana tradition, practitioners have long believed in the power of the mind to generate nirmita, or mind-made bodies, entities brought into existence through intense visualization and meditation. The word tulpa itself derives from the Tibetan sprolpa, meaning emanation or manifestation. Tulpas were not considered mere figments of the imagination. Rather, they were thought to have a real, if subtle, existence, capable of acting independently from their creator. Tibetan yogis, especially those who followed advanced tantric practices, would sometimes retreat into isolation for years, devoting themselves to complex visualizations. These visualizations could take the form of deities, protectors, or even entire environments, The purpose was not only to sharpen the mind, but also to create a living presence that could assist the practitioner on their spiritual path. In some accounts, these tulpas could take on physical form, at least to those with the psychic sensitivity to perceive them. They might serve as companions, guardians, or even teachers, embodying qualities that the practitioner wished to cultivate within themselves. One of the most widely cited accounts of tulpa creation comes from Alexandre David Neil, a French explorer and Buddhist scholar who traveled extensively in Tibet in the early 20th century. In her writings, particularly Magic and Mystery in Tibet, David Neil describes how she learned about tulpas from Tibetan lamas and even attempted to create one herself. According to her account, she succeeded in manifesting a jolly monk who eventually developed a degree of autonomy and became difficult to control, requiring her to dissolve him through further meditation. While some have questioned the literal truth of her story, it remains a foundational text for those interested in the Western understanding of tulpas and thought forms. The tulpa is not unique in world spirituality, however. Many cultures have described similar phenomena, though the belief systems and terminology differ. In Hinduism, for example, the concept of pratibimba, reflection, and pratibha, creative intuition, acknowledge the mind's power to generate forms and presences that can be experienced as real. Yogic and tantric texts speak of siddhis, or supernatural powers that advanced practitioners might develop, including the ability to project one's consciousness or create illusory bodies. These ideas were less about creating independent entities and more about demonstrating the illusory and creative nature of reality itself. But the parallels are clear. In the shamanic traditions of Siberia, Mongolia, and the Americas, the creation of spirit allies or helpers is a common theme. Shamans would enter trance states to encounter and sometimes create spirit beings who could assist in healing, divination, or protection. These spirits, while often conceived as pre-existing entities, could also be generated or shaped by the shaman's intent and imagination. The line between discovering and creating a spirit was often blurred, and the pragmatic focus was on the efficacy of the relationship, rather than metaphysical distinctions. Moving westward, the idea of thought forms finds resonance in the magical and mystical traditions of the Western world. In the Hermetic and Neoplatonic philosophies of late antiquity, the cosmos was seen as a living, ensouled entity, and the mind as a microcosm capable of reflecting and influencing the macrocosm. Theurgy, a form of ritual magic practiced by Neoplatonists, involved invoking divine presences and sometimes creating eidolons, or images, that could serve as vessels for spiritual forces. These images, whether physical statues or mental constructs, were believed to be animated by the focused will and imagination of the practitioner. In the grimoires and magical books of the European Middle Ages and Renaissance, one finds instructions for the creation of familiars, servitors, and artificial spirits. The Liber Juratus, or Sworn Book of Honorius, for example, describes rituals for summoning and commanding spirits to perform tasks. The Key of Solomon and other grimoires detail the construction of talismans and images designed to house spirits or magical forces. While these texts usually frame the spirits as independent beings, there is often an implicit understanding that the magician's will and imagination play a crucial role in their manifestation and control. By the 19th century, with the rise of spiritualism, theosophy, and the occult revival, the idea of thought forms became more explicit. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Annie Besant, and Charles Leadbeater, key figures in the Theosophical Society, wrote extensively about thought forms. In their view, thoughts and emotions were not merely internal phenomena, but could take on a quasi-physical existence in the subtle planes of reality. In their influential book, Thought Forms, Besant and Leadbeater described how powerful emotions, or repeated thoughts, could generate distinct shapes, colors, and presences in the astral realm. These thought forms could influence others, linger in places, or even take on a life of their own, especially if reinforced by collective belief or ritual. The Theosophists drew on both Eastern and Western sources, synthesizing ideas from Tibetan Buddhism, Hinduism, Hermeticism, and spiritualism. They described three main types of thought forms: those generated by the emotions, those created by the intellect, and those intentionally constructed for a specific purpose. The third type most closely resembles what modern practitioners would call servitors or constructs, entities deliberately formed to carry out a particular task or embody a certain energy. The idea of thought forms as semi-autonomous entities was further developed in the early 20th century by occultists such as Dion Fortune and Israel Regardie. Fortune, in her writings on psychic self-defense, warned of the dangers of artificial elementals, thought forms empowered by strong emotion or ritual, which could become parasitic or hostile if not properly controlled. Drawing on his experiences with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, emphasized the importance of visualization, intention, and ritual in the creation and management of such entities. As the 20th century progressed, the idea of thought forms continued to evolve, influenced by developments in psychology, parapsychology, and popular culture. The emergence of chaos magic in the 1970s and 1980s marked a significant turning point. Chaos magicians, rejecting the dogmatism and hierarchy of traditional occult systems, embraced a pragmatic and experimental approach to magic. They coined the term servitor to describe deliberately created thought forms designed to carry out specific tasks for the magician. Unlike the more elaborate egregores or group mind entities, servitors were seen as personal, programmable constructs, limited in scope and duration. Chaos magic emphasized the role of belief, symbolism, and psychological techniques in magical practice. Creating a servitor became a matter of defining its purpose, attributes, and appearance, charging it with energy through ritual, meditation, or emotional intensity, and then launching it into action. Servitors could be dissolved or reabsorbed by the creator when their task was complete. This approach demystified the process, framing it as a kind of applied psychology or creative visualization rather than supernatural intervention. Despite the rationalist veneer, chaos magicians and contemporary occultists often report striking experiences with their servitors, encounters that feel autonomous, surprising, or even challenging. The line between imagination and independent existence remains as blurry as ever, echoing the ambiguities found in earlier traditions. Servitors and thought forms, whether understood as psychological constructs, energetic entities, or something else entirely, continue to occupy a liminal space between mind and matter, self and other. The cross-cultural history of thought forms reveals both continuity and innovation. In each era and tradition, the underlying idea remains the same. The human mind is not a passive receiver of reality, but an active creator, capable of generating presences, forces, and entities that can shape the world and the self. Whether as tulpas, familiars, artificial elementals, or servitors, these constructs serve as mirrors of the psyche, tools for transformation, and reminders of the mysterious power of imagination. To appreciate the historical roots of servitor creation fully, it is important to recognize the diversity of motivations and interpretations that have shaped the practice. In the Tibetan context, the creation of tulpas was often a spiritual exercise, aimed at realizing the emptiness and interdependence of all phenomena. The tulpa was both a tool and a test, a way to confront the mind's capacity for illusion and creativity, and to transcend attachment to self and other. The dangers of tulpas developing autonomy or turning hostile were seen as reminders of the need for discipline, ethical intention, and wisdom. In shamanic cultures, the creation or engagement with spirit allies was pragmatic and relational. Shamans were healers, guides, and mediators between worlds, and their relationships with spirits, whether inherited, discovered, or created, were central to their work. The spirits might be seen as aspects of nature, ancestors, or projections of the shaman's own power. The effectiveness of the relationship depended on ritual, respect, and ongoing negotiation, rather than on ontological certainty. In the Western magical tradition, the creation of thought forms and servitors has been shaped by evolving understandings of the mind, the will, and the nature of reality. From the Neoplatonic emphasis on the imagination as a divine faculty, to the Renaissance focus on correspondences and the manipulation of subtle forces, to the modern psychological framing of magic as applied belief and intention, the practice has continually adapted to new paradigms. The persistence of the idea across centuries and cultures suggests that it taps into something fundamental about human consciousness: the need to externalize, personify, and work with the forces of the psyche. In recent decades, the language of psychology and cognitive science has offered new ways to understand thought forms. Jung's concept of the autonomous complex, for example, describes patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that develop a life of their own within the psyche. These complexes can act independently of the conscious will, influencing perception and action in ways that resemble the behavior of thought forms or servitors. The process of creating, communicating with, and integrating these complexes parallels the rituals and techniques of magical practice. Similarly, the practice of active imagination, pioneered by Jung and his followers, involves entering into dialogue with autonomous figures or presences encountered in dreams, fantasies, or meditation. These figures can offer guidance, challenge assumptions, or embody aspects of the self that have been neglected or repressed. Whether understood as aspects of the unconscious, spiritual beings, or psychological constructs, they serve a similar function to tulpas, familiars, and servitors. The rise of digital technology and virtual reality has added a new dimension to the history of thought forms. In online communities devoted to tulpamancy, the deliberate creation of tulpas as companions or guides, practitioners use forums, chat rooms, and virtual spaces to share experiences, techniques, and stories. For many, the tulpa is experienced as a distinct personality, with its own thoughts, feelings, and perspectives, coexisting alongside the host in a shared mental space. The boundary between imagination and reality becomes even more porous in these contexts, raising questions about the nature of consciousness, identity, and the limits of the mind. This contemporary resurgence of interest in tulpas and thought forms reflects both continuity with ancient traditions and adaptation to new cultural conditions. The motivations for creating tulpas or servitors vary: companionship, self-exploration, magical practice, or curiosity, but the underlying process is remarkably consistent: focused intention, visualization, emotional investment, and ongoing interaction. The results, too, are diverse, ranging from fleeting impressions to enduring, life-changing relationships. Throughout history, the creation of thought forms has been both celebrated and feared. The power to bring a being into existence through the mind alone is awe-inspiring, but it also carries risks. Stories abound of tulpas or thought forms developing independence, turning hostile, or becoming difficult to control. In magical and spiritual traditions, these tales serve as warnings about the importance of ethical intention, discipline, and self-knowledge. The mind is a powerful tool, but it is also a source of illusion, projection, and potential chaos. At the same time, the creation of thought forms has been a source of healing, inspiration, and self-discovery. For many practitioners, working with tulpas, servitors, or spirit allies has led to greater self-awareness, emotional integration, and a sense of connection to something larger than the individual ego. The process can be therapeutic, creative, and transformative, allowing the practitioner to externalize and work with aspects of themselves that might otherwise remain hidden or inaccessible. In examining the historical roots of servitor creation and thought forms, it becomes clear that the boundaries between magic, psychology, spirituality, and culture are fluid. What one tradition frames as a spiritual being, another might see as a psychological complex or a manifestation of the collective unconscious. The techniques and outcomes are often similar, even when the metaphysical explanations differ. This suggests that the phenomenon of thought form creation is less about the objective existence of autonomous entities, and more about the capacity of the human mind to generate meaningful experiences, relationships, and transformations. The enduring fascination with thought forms speaks to a deep human need to personify, externalize, and interact with the forces that shape our lives. Whether as protectors, companions, guides, or tools, these constructs allow us to engage with our inner world in a tangible, relational way. They bridge the gap between imagination and reality, self and other, the known and the unknown. In the chapters that follow, we will explore the practical techniques and contemporary applications of servitor creation, drawing on both historical sources and modern innovations. But it is important to remember that these practices are not new inventions. They are the latest expressions of a long and varied tradition. By understanding the historical roots of thought forms, we gain insight into the enduring power of the mind to create, transform, and transcend. The journey from Tibetan tulpas to modern servitors is not simply a story of occult curiosity or psychological experimentation. It is a testament to the creative and mysterious nature of consciousness itself. As we move forward, we will see how these ancient ideas have been adapted to new contexts, from the solitary magician's ritual to the collaborative spaces of online communities. The language may change, and the techniques may evolve, but the core principle remains. The mind is a maker, capable of bringing forth presences that can serve, challenge, and transform us. The history of thought forms is, in many ways, a history of the imagination, a record of humanity's ongoing dialogue with the unseen world and with the depths of its own being. This recognition of the mind's generative power is both liberating and sobering. The ability to create a servitor or thought form is not simply a magical trick or psychological curiosity, it is a profound responsibility. Throughout history, practitioners have emphasized the need for clarity of purpose, ethical intention, and ongoing vigilance. The entities we create, whether as tulpas, familiars, or servitors, are reflections of our own minds, our hopes, fears, desires, and shadows. To work with them skillfully is to engage in a process of self-knowledge and transformation, one that requires courage, humility, and respect. In conclusion, the historical roots of servitor creation and thought forms stretch across cultures and centuries, linking the mystics of Tibet with the magicians of the West, the shamans of Siberia with the psychologists and technomancers of the modern era. The diversity of beliefs and practices reflects the richness of human imagination and the universality of the desire to shape reality through the power of the mind. By honoring this history, we can approach the practice of servitor creation with both reverence and creativity, drawing on the wisdom of the past as we forge new paths into the unknown. Chapter 3: Theoretical Foundations, Mind, Energy, and Intention. The study and practice of servitor creation stands at the intersection of ancient esoteric traditions and contemporary explorations of consciousness. At its core, the craft is predicated on the idea that the mind is not merely a passive observer of reality, but an active participant, capable of shaping, directing, and manifesting subtle energies. To understand the theoretical foundations of servitor creation, it is essential to examine the roles of mind, energy, and intention, three pillars that underpin the very possibility of generating autonomous thought forms. The concept of the mind as a creative force is not new. Throughout history, mystical traditions from Hermeticism to Tibetan Buddhism have asserted that consciousness is the fundamental substrate of existence. In these systems, the mind is not confined to the physical brain, but extends into what is often called the subtle or energetic body. This energetic aspect of consciousness is said to interact with the world in ways that transcend the limitations of ordinary perception and action. The notion of the mind as a field, rather than a mere byproduct of neural activity, finds echoes in modern theories of consciousness, including those that posit a non-local or distributed model of awareness. From this perspective, the creation of a servitor, a deliberately constructed thought form endowed with a specific purpose, becomes an act of conscious participation in the subtle realms of existence. The practitioner, through focused intention and ritualized action, impresses upon the field of consciousness a pattern or template. This template, imbued with energy and direction, takes on a life of its own within the boundaries set by its creator. The servitor thus emerges as a kind of psychic technology, a tool crafted from the raw materials of mind and energy, shaped by intention. To appreciate how this process works, it is necessary to delve into the concept of energy as understood in esoteric and occult traditions. While the term energy is used in many contexts, in the realm of servitor creation, it refers to a subtle, non-physical force that underlies and animates all phenomena. This energy is known by many names: Qi in Chinese philosophy, Prana in Hinduism, Mana in Polynesian traditions, and Elan Vital in Western esotericism. Although these terms arise from different cultural contexts, they all point to an invisible, animating principle that is both the substance and the medium of magical work. In practical terms, this subtle energy is believed to be modulated and directed by the mind. Through techniques such as visualization, meditation, and breathwork, practitioners learn to sense, gather, and project this energy. The creation of a servitor involves concentrating this energy into a coherent form, one that is both stable and responsive to its assigned task. The servitor is, in a sense, a crystallization of the practitioner's will, held together by the ongoing investment of attention and belief. Intention is the third pillar of servitor creation, and perhaps the most crucial. Intention is not merely a fleeting thought or desire, it is a focused, sustained direction of consciousness. In magical theory, Intention acts as the organizing principle that gives shape and purpose to energy. It is the blueprint according to which the servitor is constructed. Without clear intention, the energies mobilized in the act of creation remain diffuse and ineffective. You have been listening to an extended preview of Servitor Creation and Thoughtforms. To continue reading, visit the LLH Media Store or the book's Amazon listing.